In chapter 11, we talk very briefly about viruses, and we really only talk about viruses so that we can talk about transduction. We don't talk about how viruses really infect other organisms besides bacteria, or how how viruses actually infect other systems. But I got a question from one of our students about viruses and just sort of how they behave in the body. So I wanted to talk about this, especially since we've got all this COVID craziness. That's obviously a virus that's in the forefront of everyone's mind, and we're getting into cold and flu season. So I thought it was timely to talk about this. You are not required to know this information. This is simply educational interest only. So when we're talking about viruses that infect people or other animals, they tend to be the things that give us the most trouble because we can't get rid of them. We can treat bacteria with antibiotics, but we cannot treat viruses with antibiotics. And so this causes some problems. So the way that viruses work is that they target specific cells in the body. So you contract a virus, it does not and it cannot infect all of the different cell types. Instead, and I'm going to draw a little coronavirus type virus here. And there are different shapes of viruses, but there's some sticking off here, all over this little round capsule. So this little round capsule with these spikes sticking off are basically recognition proteins. And those recognition proteins are going to bind some cell in our body. So here's our cell with our nucleus. And that cell is going to have some sort of protein or glycoprotein or other type of receptor on the outside. And this virus is going to recognize it and attach there. Now, this spike on the outside of our cells in our body might have nothing at all to do with the virus. It's just some sort of protein, glycoprotein, lipoprotein, cell signal thing that's stuck on the outside. And somehow this virus evolution is quite interesting. I'm not talking about that here. This virus has evolved to recognize that molecule on the outside of the cell in the body. Now, these molecules on these cells are going to be specific to different cells within our body. So, for example, coronavirus, flu virus, cold virus, those are all respiratory viruses. They they identify these types of proteins on respiratory cells. So these are going to be something that is common to all the cells that that attract this virus. So, example, coronavirus enters through your nose and attaches to cells in your lungs and through your respiratory tract. They are actually recognizing something called an ACE2 receptor, which has nothing to do with the virus. It has to do with production of basically receiving chemicals that control blood pressure. So nothing to do with COVID-19. So the virus, whether we're talking about COVID or flu or something like HIV, can only infect the cells that it actually recognizes that protein for, or whatever this molecule is. So COVID, flu, these are respiratory. So in theory, if you were to just get a virus particle on your hand and it never made its way near your face, it's not going to infect you through your hand. It has to have access to the actual cell that that it recognizes. So if it doesn't get into your respiratory system, you're not going to be infected. HIV has recognition for specific cells in your immune system and neurons. So again, if that HIV virus can't make it to those cells in your neurons or your immune system, it's not going to infect you. This is also why viruses are transmitted in different ways. COVID and flu are respiratory, so you spew them out via your respiratory system and you breathe in someone else's via your respiratory system. HIV requires entrance into the body. This is why it's passed by fluids. It cannot access those immune system cells through your respiratory system. You don't pass it through sneezing. And it's not released through those cells in your respiratory system. So the second part of this, this question that I was asked is, how do you treat viruses? Can you kill them? Can you do anything about them? Well, in general, the answer is no. We can't do anything about them. There are some recent antivirals that have been produced. For example, Tamiflu is a relatively new but getting to be more common antiviral. There are also HIV antiviral cocktails that are used to treat these viruses. These antivirals generally work to block viral reproduction. And in general, they work to block the viral replication of its genetic material. Antivirals are hard to produce though, because in general, viruses have very high mutation rate. And so they can change very quickly. So it's hard to produce an antiviral that viruses are not going to evolve against, basically. So we are left with our immune response. Basically, when you have a virus, all you can do is treat the symptoms, get lots of water, stay hydrated, rest, and let your immune system do its thing. Let your immune system fight off that virus. Let your immune system find the cells that are infected, destroy the cells before they can replicate the viruses. Now, remember, there are two types of viral cycles. There is the lytic cycle and there's the lysogenic cycle. So in the lytic cycle, the virus enters the cell, takes over the machinery, and then causes the cell to break open, and then releases virus particles. In the lysogenic cycle, some of the or all of the viral genome is actually integrated into the host genome. So for humans, these are going to be things like herpes, plantar's warts. These are virus particles that are actually, or virus genomes, they're actually inserted into the cell. So this is why you get flare-ups. If you have a herpes infection, you get flare-ups, sores on your lips, or warts tend to come and go, because the virus is actually integrated into that cell's genome. There is basically nothing that you can do to get rid of these. Again, all you can do is treat the symptoms, attempt to control the outbreak, attempt to keep the wart from getting bigger. But the other part of this is, why do they come back? What causes that switch from lysogenic to lytic? because it's actually the lytic cycle where you're seeing those herpes flare-ups or your warts, where the virus is actually actively replicating. The short answer is basically we don't know. There's been a lot of studies done in the lambda-phage, which is the bacteriophage that infects E. coli. And basically there are two factors. There is essentially a repressor that keeps the virus dormant, and then there is a promoter that causes the virus to flip into the lytic cycle where you get the flare-up. And really, it's unknown what causes this flip from lysogenic to lytic. They understand when it happens what's going on, but it's probably some combination of environmental factors that are actually causing that virus to sort of turn on. So the bad news is there's not much you can do about these lysogenic viruses other than to treat the symptoms. And then again, just sort of let your immune system do its thing. So I honestly do not know a huge amount about the immune system, but generally there are two parts. There are T cells and there are antibodies. So T cells are the part of your immune system that recognize and destroy infected cells. And then there are the antibodies. So when you are exposed and your body recognizes that you are exposed, the immune system produces antibodies, which are usually small proteins that basically act as a memory for the virus, so that the next time you're infected, those antibodies will elicit a T cell response much faster. So this is kind of how vaccines work. You're exposed to a little bit of a virus or a virus antibody, and then your immune system has not a virus antibody. You're exposed to a small portion of the virus. Your body makes an antibody for it. So then the next time you're exposed to, say, the flu, your body can, because it already knows that there's an invader, it already recognizes this invader, the T cells can respond much more quickly. And either you don't show the symptoms or your symptoms are much more mild. So upon first time infection, it takes a while for your body to recognize that there's a foreign invader. Once you have antibodies produced, your body's going to recognize that invasion much more quickly. So the immune system is much more complicated than that, but that's the general idea, that if you're infected by a virus, the T cells are going to attack them. And that's really the only way that you can get rid of a virus. If the virus happens to be lysogenic, though, you're probably not going to be able to get rid of it ever.